Welcome to this video. If this is your first time watching us, we would love to know where you are watching from. Let us know in the comments which country you are watching from. Do not forget to leave a comment so we can get to know you better. And if you enjoy the content, please share it with your friends to support the channel. Thank you for your amazing support and enjoy the video. 8 years ago, I worked as a park ranger in a remote mountain forest somewhere in the western United States. That area was known for two things: strange disappearances and mountain lions that nobody ever saw until it was too late. We used to call them ghost cats because they moved through the woods without making a sound, as if the forest itself was hiding them. One summer night, we started getting complaints about a group of college kids camping near the northern trails. Loud music, shouting, drunken laughing. They were treating the forest like it was a backyard party instead of a dangerous wilderness. My partner Jim and I drove out there around 9 p.m. There were 6 of them sitting around the fire with beer cans scattered everywhere and a giant speaker blasting music into the trees. The moment we stepped out of the Jeep, one of them yelled, "Hey, the fun police are here." I ignored the comment and calmly told them to lower the noise. Other campers were trying to sleep. One of the girls apologized, but the others just laughed. We left after the first warning. Less than an hour later, the complaints started again. This time the music was even louder. When we returned, one of the guys intentionally screamed into the forest as we walked up. The others burst out laughing. That's when I stepped closer to the fire and said, "This is your final warning. And trust me, the noise isn't just disrespectful. It's dangerous." The group quieted down for a moment. A tall kid wearing a baseball cap smirked and said, "Dangerous because of what?" "Ghosts." I looked past him into the dark trees behind their camp. "Mountain lions," I said. "The locals call them ghost cats. They're attracted to loud noises at night. You won't hear them coming. You probably won't even see them until they're a few feet away." Nobody laughed this time. I continued. "So whatever you hear tonight, stay inside your tents. Don't wander into the woods. And if something moves outside your camp, don't make noise." The silence around the fire suddenly felt heavier. Then one of them forced a laugh and said, "Yeah, okay, man." We headed back to the ranger station up the hill. Halfway there, Jim started grinning. "You know what would scare the hell out of them?" he asked. Inside the visitor center storage room, there was an old preserved mountain lion pelt used for educational programs. We also had brand new night vision goggles because our supervisor had wasted the remaining yearly budget on equipment nobody actually needed. Jim grabbed the lion pelt. "Tonight," he said, "their tuition money finally pays off." Around midnight, after the entire campground went quiet, we sneaked back toward their campsite through the trees. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the whole forest had that dead stillness you only notice deep in the wilderness. No wind, no insects, nothing. I started placing fake mountain lion tracks around their tents using an old training mold we kept for ranger demonstrations. In the dark, the prints looked completely real. Meanwhile, Jim tied the lion pelt between 2 branches near the edge of camp so that it created a huge animal silhouette whenever light hit it. Then he disappeared deeper into the woods with the portable speaker. A few seconds later, the first sound echoed through the trees. A low, guttural growl. One of the campers immediately whispered from inside a tent, "Did you guys hear that?" Another growl came, closer this time. I slowly drove the ranger jeep toward the campsite with the headlights off. When I jumped out, I grabbed my flashlight and swept it across the trees. The beam hit the lion pelt. Its shadow stretched across the woods like a massive predator crouching between the branches. Someone inside a tent screamed, then total chaos erupted. Zippers slammed shut. People started yelling over each other. "Oh my God! What the hell is that? Keep the tents closed!" Then Jim shouted from somewhere in the darkness, "Stay inside your tents." A second later, "It's getting closer." One of the girls started crying. Then came the line that nearly made me lose it laughing. "There's another one behind us." At that point, the entire camp completely lost their minds. I killed the flashlight, ripped the lion pelt down, and both of us sprinted back into the jeep before speeding away through the trees while terrified screaming echoed behind us. We laughed the entire drive back to the station, at least until around 3 a.m. That's when a radio call came in from another camper near the river. He reported hearing animal screams somewhere north of the campground. Real ones. Jim and I drove back out there immediately. The forest felt different now. Too quiet. When we reached the trail near the college kids' campsite, we found tracks in the mud. Actual tracks, not ours. These were larger, deeper, real mountain lion prints. The tracks circled the students' camp, only a few yards away from where we had planted the fake ones. Then they disappeared into the woods. Jim stared at the ground without saying a word. Neither of us laughed after that. Just after sunrise, the college kids finally started crawling out of their tents. Most of them looked exhausted. One guy looked like he hadn't slept at all. Then they saw the tracks, real claw marks, fresh prints, surrounding the campsite. Panic spread across their faces instantly. One of the boys walked up to me slowly and asked, "You guys knew something was really out there, didn't you?" I looked toward the tree line for a long moment before answering. "Sometimes," I said quietly, "the forest listens when you talk about it." None of them played music again for the rest of the trip, and we never told them how close the joke came to becoming real. 3 nights after the incident with the college kids, Jim stopped joking about it entirely. At first, I thought he was just embarrassed that our prank had almost gone wrong, but something about him changed after we found those real tracks around the campsite. He became quieter, distracted. Every time we worked the night shift together, he kept scanning the tree line like he expected something to be standing there watching us. A week later, we received another complaint from the same area of the forest. This time it wasn't noise. It was screaming, a married couple camping near. Black Pine Ridge radioed the station around 1:40 a.m. The husband sounded terrified. He kept repeating the same sentence over and over. "There's something outside our tent." We drove out immediately. The road to Black Pine Ridge twisted through dense forest with almost no moonlight reaching the ground. The deeper we went, the colder it became. By the time we reached the trailhead, fog had started settling between the trees. Jim killed the engine. That's when we heard it. Yo. Scream, not human, not exactly animal either. It sounded almost like a woman crying somewhere far away in the woods. Jim looked at me immediately. "Mountain lion," he whispered. I wanted to believe him. Female mountain lions sometimes sound horrifyingly human at night. Every ranger knows that. But there was something wrong about this sound. It carried through the forest too slowly, too deliberately. The screaming stopped the moment we stepped out of the jeep. Then everything went silent. No insects, no wind, nothing. We grabbed our flashlights and followed the trail toward the campers' location. About halfway there, Jim suddenly froze and pointed his light toward the mud beside the path. Tracks, but not cougar tracks, bare human footprints. The problem was, they were enormous, at least size 15. Maybe bigger, and deep enough in the mud to suggest whoever made them was extremely heavy. The footprints circled around the trail before disappearing into the trees. Jim swallowed hard. "Tell me those belonged to a hunter." But there were no vehicle tracks nearby. No campsites registered in that section of the forest either. Then we heard the scream again, closer. This time, the couple's tent was only another 100 yards. Ahead, we picked up the pace when we finally reached their campsite. Both campers were locked inside their tent, shaking uncontrollably. The husband burst out the second he saw us. "Something was walking around us," he said. "It kept circling the tent for almost an hour. Did you see it?" I asked. He nodded slowly. Only for a second. His face had gone completely pale. It stood behind the trees near the fire. "What did?" The man hesitated before answering. "I thought it was a person at first, until it moved." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Jim walked around the campsite with his flashlight while I questioned the couple. That's when he suddenly called my name. I walked over. Near the edge of camp, beside the remains of the fire pit, were more footprints, huge bare footprints pressed deep into the dirt, and right beside them, mountain lion tracks. The two sets moved together side by side before disappearing into the forest. The husband looked down at them and whispered, "That's impossible." None of us answered. Then, from somewhere deep in the trees behind us, came a low growl, not from a cougar, something deeper, something wrong. The couple panicked instantly and rushed toward the jeep. Jim and I backed away slowly, sweeping our flashlights across the woods. For one brief second, my light caught something between the trees. Tall. Too tall. Its eyes reflected pale white in the darkness before it stepped behind a trunk and vanished. Jim saw it too, because he quietly said, "Don't run." The growling stopped. Then came the sound of footsteps circling us slowly in the dark. Heavy footsteps. Crunch. 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 Always just outside the flashlight beams. We made it back to the jeep without speaking another word. The moment everyone got inside, Jim slammed the gas pedal and we sped down the dirt road as fast as possible. Nobody talked during the drive back, not until the couple finally left the station just before sunrise. Then Jim locked the office door, sat down across from me and said something I'll never forget. "You know those fake cougar sounds I played last week?" I nodded. He stared toward the dark window beside us. I heard one answering back. I wasn't a park ranger, but for a while I lived in a cabin on the edge of a national park. When I say edge, I don't mean some tourist campground with RV hookups and families roasting marshmallows 10 feet away. I mean real wilderness, the kind that swallows sound after dark, the kind where the trees seem endless no matter which direction you look. The cabin sat nearly 4 miles off the main road, hidden at the end of a narrow dirt trail that twisted through dense forest. There was no plumbing, no electricity, no internet. At night, the only light came from lanterns and whatever moonlight managed to slip through the trees. The place technically belonged to an older couple who rented it cheaply to seasonal workers and park interns. My roommate at the time was training with the National Park Service. He loved the idea of living wild, but the truth was he was a city kid trying to cosplay as a mountain man. I, on the other hand, grew up around forests. I knew how different the woods felt after sunset. During the day, the area was beautiful. Quiet streams, deer trails, mountains hidden behind layers of fog. But after midnight, everything changed. The first time I heard the footsteps was around 2 in the morning. I was lying awake in my bunk, listening to the wind scrape branches against the cabin walls, when I heard something moving outside. Crunch, 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 slow footsteps, not animal movement, not random rustling, actual footsteps. At first I thought maybe it was my roommate coming back from the outhouse, but then I realized the steps were circling the cabin itself. I sat up and listened carefully. The footsteps would approach the tree line, then stop, completely stop, no branches snapping, no leaves moving, nothing. Then, after a minute or two, crunch, 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 like whoever it was had started walking again. I told myself it was probably a deer or maybe a wild hog. Your brain does strange things in the dark, especially out there where there are no streetlights or distant traffic to ground you in reality. Still, something felt wrong. The cabin didn't even have a lockable door. The owners refused to install one because they claimed nobody comes out this far anyway. That stopped sounding comforting after the 3rd night. Every evening, right around the same time, I'd hear movement in the woods, sometimes beside the cabin, sometimes farther away near the old tool shed. Always slow, always deliberate, and every single time I tried to shine a flashlight toward the sound, it stopped instantly, like whoever was out there knew I was looking. My roommate thought I was losing it. "You're hearing animals," he told me one night while laughing over canned soup heated on the stove. "You've been watching too many horror movies." Maybe he was right, but one night, around 3 a.m., I finally looked out the window at the exact moment the footsteps stopped, and I saw someone standing between the trees, far enough away that I couldn't make out details, but close enough to know it was a person. They weren't moving, just standing there watching the cabin. Remember the feeling that crawled into my stomach when I realized something else. Couldn't see a flashlight, no lantern, no camping gear, nothing, just a dark silhouette standing perfectly, still in the woods at 3 a.m. Woke my roommate up immediately. By the time he stumbled over to the window, the figure was gone. He got irritated with me after that, said I was becoming paranoid. But I noticed something strange over the next few days. Even he stopped going outside alone after dark. Neither of us admitted we were nervous, but little things changed. He started checking the windows before bed. He kept his hunting knife beside his mattress. We both listened carefully whenever the forest went quiet. And if you've spent enough time in the wilderness, you know sudden silence is never a good sign. A week later, I started sleeping in my car. I parked nearly an acre away from the cabin in a small clearing hidden by trees. I figured if someone really was watching the cabin, they wouldn't know where I was. The first night in the car was peaceful. The second night wasn't. I woke up around 1:40 in the morning to the sound of footsteps again. Except this time, they were much closer. Crunch, crunch, slowly circling the car. I froze. Every instinct told me not to move. The windows were fogged slightly from my breathing, but through the windshield I could barely see a figure moving between the trees, tall, very thin, and carrying something long in one hand. At first I thought it was a walking stick. Then the moonlight hit metal, a rifle. The figure stopped near the driver's side of my car, I remember. Holding my breath so hard my chest hurt, the man stood there silently for almost a full minute. Then he walked away into the darkness. The next morning, I packed my things. I moved out that same day. My roommate laughed when I told him why. "You seriously think somebody's stalking this place?" he said. I told him he needed to install locks or cameras. He didn't listen. 2 weeks later, the cabin was broken into while he was inside. Nothing huge was stolen the first time. Mostly food, tools, and some personal belongings. Whoever did it entered quietly while he was asleep. The second break-in happened less than 10 days later. That time they took more. My roommate finally called the property owners and demanded motion cameras be installed around the cabin. A few nights later, one of the cameras captured something. The footage was grainy and black and white, but you could clearly see a man emerging from the woods carrying a long rifle. He moved slowly across the property before crouching down inside the bushes facing the cabin. Then he stayed there for almost 3 hours. Not moving, just watching the cabin. The creepiest part wasn't the rifle, it was that the timestamp on the footage showed he arrived at the property around midnight, exactly the same time I used to hear the footsteps outside my window. I decided to travel to Colorado to spend some time alone in the wilderness. It wasn't just a casual trip for me. It was a way to disconnect from everything familiar and test how far I could push myself in isolation. I had heard about hidden hot springs near the Colorado River, accessible only during the winter months. In summer, the river swells from melting snow and completely floods the area, making those springs disappear beneath the water. That detail alone was enough to convince me to go. The land was managed by the Bureau of Land Management, so everything was official and regulated. When I arrived, a woman at the office gave me a very serious set of instructions. One of them stood out in a strange way. I had to write the date on my car's windshield every week so they would know I was still alive out there. She didn't smile when she said it, which somehow made it worse. After that, I started my hike. I had to leave my car behind and walk about 6 kilometers into the wilderness to reach my campsite. The trail wasn't marked clearly, and the deeper I went, the more the world felt like it was being erased behind me. When I finally arrived, I set up my tent near a cliff overlooking the river. It was about 12 meters above the water. My logic was simple. Even if something went wrong, I could jump down and reach the hot springs below to avoid hypothermia. It sounded insane even to me, but out there, you start accepting strange ideas as plans. At night, the silence became unbearable. I kept thinking about bears. They were supposed to be hibernating, but if one wasn't, it would likely be starving. And a starving bear is exactly what you never want to encounter in a thin fabric tent. Inside my tent, I quickly realized something important. Bear spray doesn't feel very reassuring when there's only a thin layer of fabric between you and whatever is outside. I barely slept. Then, early the next morning, I heard something outside my tent. It started as faint movement. Then it grew louder. Heavy footsteps, strange breathing, multiple sources moving through the brush. I froze instantly. My body refused to move, as if even the smallest sound would give me away. The footsteps grew closer and closer, until they were right beside my tent. Then I heard it, sniffing, slow, deliberate sniffing against the fabric. In that moment, my mind was completely convinced it was a bear. A large one, maybe more than one. I didn't move a single muscle. The sniffing stopped, then shifted slightly. The movement outside continued, circling the tent. I could hear multiple animals now, brushing through the grass and snow. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, I gathered enough courage to slowly lift my head toward the tent. Opening, what I saw shattered every terrifying assumption I had made in the last few minutes. It was a herd of elk. I can't describe the relief that hit me. It was so intense it almost felt unreal. They weren't hunting. They weren't threatening me. They were just passing through, curious about the strange object in their path. For a moment, I just sat there, half laughing in disbelief. All that fear, all those worst-case scenarios my mind had built, destroyed by a group of elk casually walking through my campsite. But even then, one thought stayed with me, out there in the wilderness. Fear often arrives before danger ever does, and sometimes it's the only thing that makes you feel alive. I've been a park ranger for most of my adult life, and in that time I've learned something very important about the wilderness. People think they understand it, but they don't. They think danger comes in obvious forms, bears, wolves, storms, but most of what truly unsettles you out there is subtle, quiet, almost familiar. This story, however, isn't mine. It's something I heard years ago from my own family, passed down like a warning disguised as a memory. My great-uncle, an old man by the time I was born, was a strange one, the kind of person who never fully left the woods even when he was back in town. He had spent most of his younger years exploring the forests of Maine, long before it was as regulated and monitored as it is today. Back then, he didn't go camping the way most people do now. No proper tent setups, no reinforced shelters, no modern gear lists. He simply carried a sleeping bag, found a spot he liked, and lay down on the ground as if the forest itself was just another bedroom. People told him it was reckless. He never cared. Maine, after all, isn't known for lions or anything out of the ordinary. Yes, there are black bears, but anyone who's worked long enough in those forests knows the truth. Black bears usually avoid humans. They're cautious, predictable even. That gave him a sense of confidence that, in hindsight, might have been misplaced. He used to say, "The forest is only dangerous if you forget it's alive." None of us really understood what he meant. One summer night, he decided to sleep deeper inside the woods than usual. Not near any trail, not near any marked area, just a quiet patch of forest where the trees grew thick enough to block out most of the sky. He laid his sleeping bag directly on the ground, as he always did, and fell asleep almost immediately. According to him, the night was completely normal at first. No strange noises, no unsettling silence, just the steady rhythm of nature doing what it always does. But sometime in the middle of the night, that changed. He felt something touch his face. At first, it was light, almost like a breeze or a dream trying to pull him awake. Then it happened again. A small, deliberate tap against his cheek. He opened his eyes, and that's when he saw it. Standing directly over him was a raccoon, not running, not startled, not behaving like the usual scavenger you'd expect to flee the moment it senses a human. It was simply there, looking at him, studying him. And then it reached out again, gently touching his face with its small, surprisingly careful hands. Now, most people would react instantly, jump up, shout, scare it away, maybe even panic. But my great-uncle didn't. He just stared at it for a moment, And then, as the story goes, he turned over on his side and went back to sleep. No shooing it away. No concern, no fear. Just sleep. When he told this story years later, people thought he was joking or exaggerating. But he always insisted on one thing. The raccoon didn't act like an animal that was lost or curious. It acted like it had a purpose. As a ranger now, I've spent enough nights in the forest to understand how strange that really is. Animals don't usually approach humans like that without reason, especially not so calmly, especially not at that distance. And yet, the part that always stayed with me wasn't the raccoon itself. It was my great-uncle's reaction. Because in the wilderness, most people assume the fear comes from what you see. But sometimes, the most unsettling thing is realizing that someone else didn't see anything worth being afraid of at all. They were doing a summer patrol through one of our least used campsites during what's usually the quietest season, the kind of shift where nothing ever really happens. And that's exactly why everyone lets their guard down. The desert changes that attitude fast. During the route, one of our maintenance rangers spotted something off the main track. A burned-out car sitting in the open, as if it had been placed there deliberately rather than left by accident. The metal was warped, blackened, almost melted in places like it had been exposed to far more than just fire. He called the police immediately and kept his distance. Something about it didn't feel right. Out here, experience teaches you that some things are better observed before they are approached. When law enforcement arrived, they opened the vehicle. Inside, in the driver's seat, there was a body, or what was left of one. No arms, no legs, just a torso and a head, heavily burned, unrecognizable in any meaningful way. The kind of scene that should raise questions immediately, but out there, in that remote stretch of land, answers are often replaced with convenience. They quickly labeled it a suicide. Case closed. The car was removed. But the ranger who found it couldn't let it go. From the beginning, something about the scene felt staged. Not just the burning, but the way the interior was disturbed. The glass inside the vehicle wasn't shattered outward or inward in a natural pattern. It looked wrong. Intentional in a way he couldn't fully explain. And then there was the ash. It wasn't spread randomly across the cabin. It formed patterns, subtle ones, almost circular around the seat, as if something had been scented there. Or contained. He told himself it was stress, heat, illusion. The desert plays tricks on perception. But then the small things started. A few nights later, a ranger on the North Tower reported seeing headlights in the same location where the burned car had been found, except the road to that area had been closed for years. The lights didn't behave normally. They didn't follow terrain or roads. They would appear in one place, vanish, then reappear somewhere else entirely, like they were skipping through space instead of moving through it. When backup was sent, nothing was found. No vehicle, no tracks, no evidence at all. Then came the silence problem. Motion cameras near the site were checked. All systems showed normal operation, no outages, no malfunctions. But the footage from that night was completely empty, not corrupted, not deleted, just blank, as if nothing had ever stood in front of the lens. That was the first time people stopped calling it a coincidence. A week later, 2 rangers took a night patrol to the same area. Routine check, simple route, same as always. They checked in once at 11:30 p.m. Everything was fine. Then contact stopped. The next morning, their vehicle was found at the edge of the sand. Engine still running. Doors open. No signs of struggle. No bodies. Inside, a thin layer of ash covered the seats again. The same ash pattern. The same unnatural distribution, as if it had settled with intent rather than wind. After that, the camp changed. Certain zones were quietly closed off. Patrols were rerouted. Reports became shorter, less detailed. Some things simply weren't written down anymore. Among the rangers, though, a pattern began to form. The first burned car wasn't an accident. It was a marker. Something had been left behind, and whatever it wasn't gone. It returned to the last place it was seen, every time. And now, no one goes there alone. Not because of what might happen in the moment, but because of what seems to come back after.